This is a list of ways I thought about opening this essay. By talking about High Fidelity, the Nick Hornby novel and film and TV show and Broadway play about Rob, a dude in his 30s who owns a record store and, along with his employees, is constantly making desert island lists. Top 5 side one track ones, top 5 most memorable breakups. By talking about the Los Campesinos song, My Year in Lists, a song that includes a list of 5 New Year's resolutions. By showing an annual document that lives in the Notes app on my phone, a list of lists of films seen, books read, and exhibitions visited. By listing the ways I thought about opening this essay. All this to say, I like lists. There's something appealing about the way that they can silo things off, make tasks feel less daunting, make certain attempts less overwhelming. But when you're talking about lists online and when you've made videos about video games, there's one thing that seems to loom over it all, like a final boss. The list to end all lists. The backlog. On the surface, the backlog sounds like exactly what it is. A list of games you haven't played yet. Simple enough, right? Right? But it has a tendency to grow rapidly, faster than anybody could ever claim to get it under control. At the time of recording, Carrion is the 16th game I finished in 2025. It's a Metroidvania-adjacent horror game where you control an escaped biomass, a husk of grisly body horror. The game's at its best when it just lets you move around. It's full of visceral details and slimy sound design. And the point of Carrion is that you grow, consuming all in sight, becoming vast and impossible to contain. And so, as I was playing it, I ended up thinking about backlogs and the lists and challenges that we associate with them. Letterboxd is a social media site and film diary where you can log what you watch, write reviews, create lists. One feature is a watch list. It's like the backlog, exactly what it sounds like. A list of films you want to watch. My watch list is over 850 films long. Watching a movie is, for most people, going to be easier than finishing a video game. The longest film on my watch list is a 1927 biopic of Napoleon, and it's 5.5 hours long. This, for a film, is very long. But one of the games I'm currently in the middle of, Okami, takes 33 hours to beat according to how long to beat, and that's just the main story. I could watch Napoleon 6 times in the time it would take for me to beat Okami once. All this to say, I like lists, honestly, but ironically, they can feel overwhelming. When everything you've ever wanted to watch or play or read is stacked up in front of you and you're constantly aware of how long each one should take, it's difficult not to get a little existential about it. And so I thought it would be a good idea to take these lists that are hundreds of items long and make them smaller, more manageable. Every year, Letterboxd users create challenge lists. They tend to be 52 films long, 1 film a week. Backloggd, a website that's essentially Letterboxd but for video games, does the same thing. At the time of writing, I've finished 16 games this year, and I have tried to keep track of all of them in these lists on spreadsheets, somewhere I can keep some modicum of control over a list that, like the monster in Carrion, hasn't stopped growing. I've probably added at least a dozen games to the list thanks to sales and gifts and poor impulse control. I don't think my backlog or my watch list will ever reach 0. I don't know that I would ever want it to. But this essay isn't about backlogs. In his short story, The Library of Babel, Jorge Luis Borges wrote about a vast, labyrinthine library that goes on forever, a library that contains on its shelves the sum of all knowledge, seemingly more words on more pages than the population of the earth could ever read, even if they had an eternity in which to do it. And at first, the story tells us that this was seen as a good thing. When it was announced that the library contained all books, the first reaction was unbounded joy. All men felt themselves the possessors of an intact and secret treasure. It's tempting to think of the backlog in similar terms. In theory, it can contain all games, and who wouldn't want to respond to that with unbounded joy? I would squeeze every drop I could from every game I got. I would fall in love with franchises because every Friday I would go to Blockbuster, rent a game, and play it endlessly for a couple of nights. But the backlog changes that relationship. There are so many things there, and it's impossible not to feel like you need to play all of them. But if Borges' story is anything to go by, then this secret treasure is no longer secret. It might not even be a treasure. For the story's narrator, the vastness of the library becomes small with time. He prepares for his to come to an end a few leagues from the hexagon where he was born, with his eyes unable to make out a lifetime's worth of writing and reading. This year I've barely made a dent in any of the backlogs, challenges, lists, or spreadsheets I've been tracking. If anything, I've added more to them than I've taken off, and there are lots of ways to think about them. As experiences, as data points, in rare cases as something I'll be talking about endlessly. But I think, if anything, I've begun to think of them as small, countless weights. Borges' narrator only travelled journeying for books in his younger days, but as the world got smaller, it seemed to grow heavier around him, and when it comes to trying to get these things done, to face seemingly insurmountable lists of things to do and experience and feel, there is one way to end all weights. You are depressed. Interaction is exhausting, and you are becoming more and more withdrawn. This is the text that greets you at the beginning of Depression Quest, a point-and-click interactive fiction game from 2013. I'm not sure if there's anything I can say about it that hasn't been said already, but I've been playing it a lot lately. One of the things that looms over it is the project that your anonymous protagonist has going on in the background. Sometimes, depending on the decisions you make, they might be able to make some headway on it, but mostly it casts a shadow, emblematic of the things that seem impossible when you're living with and through depression. When I've played the game, I've thought of this video as the project. Depression Quest is simple. You read through narrative vignettes and then click an option that progresses the story in a different branching screen. At the bottom of each screen, the game tells you about the severity of your depression, if you're in therapy, if you're taking medication. When I first played Depression Quest, I did it in a way that felt aspirational. I let my protagonist open up, socialize, and go to therapy. There's something about the game and its willingness to not just stare the void in the face, but make you look directly at it, that made it feel as if I couldn't subject my anonymous protagonist, my cipher, to the things that were still lurking in the deepest depths of the illness. Much of Depression Quest is in lists. Your options are always numbered, but not all of them are available. The more withdrawn you become, the more options are struck out in red. There's a brutal simplicity to it. The way it shows depression is something that can take root, grow, weigh you down. Sometimes I imagine it like the creature in Carrion. Sometimes I imagine it like the end of the world. In Melancholia, a celestial object is on a crash course with the Earth, where a depressed Justine is getting married. After the ceremony, she's given a piece of ominous advice from her imperious mother. Enjoy it while it lasts. I think about the end of Melancholia a lot, the way it takes this blunt metaphor for depression to an inevitable final point. The celestial object consumes the earth. The void consumes Justine. The void consumes everything. I was surprised to get the same feeling that I had from the end of Melancholia from the Outer Wilds. The Outer Wilds is a game that's difficult to talk about without giving too much away, and doing that strips the game of its mystery, wonder, frustration, singularity. But sometimes, in Outer Wilds, some vast blue object will approach you from space and embrace you like the planet Melancholia. I think some of the appeal of Outer Wilds is such a blank canvas. It can become anything the player wants it to by almost always rewarding curiosity and persistence. And so when I played it on a Steam Deck on my partner's bedroom floor at the dawn of winter, it became a game about vastness, about feeling too small for the world. Outer Wilds was high up on my backlog. I'd seen so many people rave about it, describe it as singular, life-changing. And I loved it. Mostly. There are sections that feel unnecessarily obtuse or frustrating in their combination of difficulty and pace. But when this game hits, it hits like nothing else. Again, it's difficult to talk about in too much detail, but it tends to avoid giving answers in a traditional way. This too will probably be devoid of answers in a traditional way. I'll admit that there was a point playing Outer Wilds where I found myself sprinting to the finish. I didn't completely fill in my ship's information board, and some of the game remains a mystery to me. I'm still trying to figure out why I did this, or why I didn't. Some of it came from finding a specific planet frustrating. Some of it came from just not being able to figure out some of the side quests. And some of it, looming over me, was the backlog and the vast, ever-growing shadow of games that I haven't beaten yet. Like so many people who have been keeping backlogs over the last few years, I've been trying and mostly failing to keep a spreadsheet of the games I've been playing, finishing, dropping. And this is the first sentence of my thoughts on Disco Elysium, one of my favourite games I played in 2024. I regret not taking more time with this. I ended up getting swept up in the mystery and sprinting to the finish. Like Outer Wilds, Disco Elysium is a game that's vast. It takes place in a world that's teeming with life, and it can be made into anything the player wants it to be. And I made it an item on a spreadsheet, a box to be ticked, a cell that I could turn green. Some of this is the admittedly self-inflicted pressure of the backlog, the knowledge that there are so many other games still waiting for my attention, my time. Some of it was being swept up in the mystery that propels the narrative forward, and some of it is the strange feeling that comes from spending what feels like too long with a game, this spectre of a burnout which is, of course, more than burnout. Burnout looms over Depression Quest. In almost all of the choices the game gives you, you're able to say that whatever it is you're doing, working on the project, going to work, socializing, being with your partner, is simply too much to handle. Because sometimes everything is simply too much to handle. It's tempting to imagine a more contemporary version of the game, one full of resources and meters, health, stamina, sanity, happiness, all the things that are impacted by depression. But the game's simplicity is so much more affecting than systems could ever be, because it isn't something quantified in meters and stats. It's something that simply is, waiting to place a hand on your shoulder. The last time I played it, I needed a lot of reassurance. I was constantly asking people if I was boring, if I was too much to handle, if they would leave me. When you play Disco Elysium, there are a couple of main axes through which you end up defining your character, yourself, really, your political ideology, and the state of your inner life by the time the story is over. According to my Steam achievements, I am literally the sorriest cop on Earth. I unlocked an achievement for the number of times I said sorry. And in the time I've spent writing this, I've felt that same impulse rearing its head in the script, a need to apologize for or justify the fact that this essay is more full of personal digressions than anything else. It's structurally ungainly, and like the backlog, like all these lists, seems to be spiraling outwards with no signs of stopping. This wasn't supposed to be the next essay that I wrote. I was thinking about soldiers wandering through the desert as if it were hell itself, about bloodthirsty warlords, about the thunderous sound of helicopters and Wagner that punctuate one of the most iconic moments in Apocalypse Now, a film made of iconic moments. But then the seasons changed and my world drew in on itself. I played Outer Wilds and found myself lost in its vastness and eternity. I watched films about grief that I ended up describing as open wounds, and so I was left with this. In High Fidelity, Rob makes the case that what really matters is what you like, not what you are or like.
Books, records, films, these things matter. Call me shallow. It's the fucking truth.
The backlog feels like a version of this, a way of signifying something more than taste, but a sense of self That's why something has emerged as a consequence of acknowledging the backlog, offering myself up to it as if it were an ancient, cursed god of abundance, trying in vain to master it as I become another digital Sisyphus beset on all sides by Steam sales and Game of the Year contenders and vampire survivors. The job and responsibilities and needing to sleep have been bouncing off of games I've always been convinced I'd really like. Like the 3 times I've tried Return of the Obra Dinn, only to shelf it after a handful of hours. It's a high-concept, aesthetically unique logic puzzle about time travel, krakens, and madness at sea. And yet, whenever I try it, I get to the point where my brain no longer cooperates, where it feels like my only option is to brute force my way to connections between the characters who make up the doomed crew of the eponymous vessel. And so I stop playing, I uninstall. It's one of the few games on my spreadsheet highlighted in red. Dropped. Doing this feels like an admission of defeat, even when I know intellectually that it isn't. Skill issue, I guess. One of my favourite games I've played this year, in 2025, is The Beginner's Guide, created by Davey Reedon of the Stanley Parable. It is fundamentally a walking sim, but then so is one of my favourite games from 2024, What Remains of Edith Finch. Beginner's Guide is a little different though. At its core is a feeling that everything is unfinished. You play through a series of short games and fast abandoned projects, with Reedon explaining the context and mechanics while telling the story of their relationship with Coda, the apparent creator of these games. And a lot of these digital sketches are, in their ways, impossible. There are rooms you can't go into without Reedon changing the code, staircases that you ascend until you slow to a crawl and he lets you skip to the top. The Beginner's Guide is very comfortable in this space of the impossible. Even the central relationship feels abnormal, like the games themselves feels like something defined by this impossibility, by changes in code, by small acts of physical and emotional encroachment. Spoilers ahead for The Beginner's Guide. Late in the game, Coda talks back. We never hear their voice, never witness them in any actual conflict, but in the tower, the game's final chapter, they leave small fragments of text on walls, the kind that might accompany a painting that's left to hang in a gallery. Coda asks Reedon not just to stop showing people their games, but to stop changing them, stop trying to create an intentional psychological through line between them. In one of the earlier sketches, there are lampposts that Reedon says might mean something, just like there might be some hidden depth to the prison levels that Coda was briefly obsessed with making. But it turns out Reedon has been adding the lampposts in. He's been trying to make sense of things, to turn the games into this immensely detailed map of a person and a friendship, of something that's slipped through his grasp. Again, I think of Borges, this time on exactitude in science, the story of a people who realized the only way to create an accurate map of their empire was to recreate it on a one-to-one scale. Sometimes I imagine the figures from the story trying to do the same thing with the infinite hexagonal maze of the Library of Babel. At the end of the Beginner's Guide, you transcend above the final level, looking down on it like a god, seeing this infinite labyrinth of all the places you've traversed on your journey to get here, to the end of all things. By now this won't come as a surprise, but when I think about the Beginner's Guide, I think about depression, about the countless small ways in which it pushes you away or draws you into yourself. I'm no different than Reedon though, I know that. I look at Coda's games, these things that seem inherently disconnected from one another, and I try to create a through line, attempt to make sense of it all. I look at staircases that are made impossible to traverse, at the sheer number of prison levels, at the house in the snow that you're constantly cleaning on a loop, trying to make a dent in conversation, unable to say something that I'm certain is just there beneath the surface. This is how I played Disco Elysium too. As a sorry cop, someone constantly looking inward and picking at his own wounds. It's what I found myself thinking about when I played Outer Wilds and allowed myself to float without a care in the world towards my fate, the ghost of Melancholia looming over it. I've begun to describe myself as feeling called out by the Beginner's Guide, by my desire for people to see the work and think that it's good on one side, but on the other, to hope that the work alone is enough to keep me going, even if nobody sees it. And of course, I still hold these two things close to me, in separate hands. I probably always will. The 15th level of the beginner's guide is titled Machine. In it, you walk through a corridor as an assembled press, figures with screens for heads, simple black text on green backgrounds, all ask you about the machine. A machine that calls itself Coda. How did you capture it? What will you do with it? Can you give us answers? Do you know where the poisonous games have come from? I don't think I noticed that one the first time I played. The one about poisonous games. Looking at it now, it makes me think about the relationship between Reedon and Coda a little differently. It makes me look at these games and what they might be a monument to in a different way. When you interrogate the machine, it asks you to drop your weapon, but the game doesn't permit it. Instead, you aim and fire. Given the name of the machine, there is, of course, one way to interpret this. But looking at it again, going through the game once more, knowing what I do about who made what additions to each level, feels like this could be the most direct communication Coda has with Reedon throughout the beginner's guide, making one person he knows will play, excavate, and agonize over these games, aim a loaded weapon at the machine that makes them, a machine called Coda. In music theory, coda comes from Italian and means tail. It's a final section, bringing the composition to a close. They normally get used in classical contexts, where music is driven by ideas, themes, movements. In an essay on Chopin's A-flat major mazurka, the musicologist and theorist Charles Burkert makes the case that codas are a necessity, that something coming after the climax allows us to look back on everything that's led us here. At the end of Melancholia, all that's left to do is look back. The final level of the beginner's guide, the epilogue, is the only game not given to Reedon by Coda, and so, in theory, is made by Reedon himself. The final moment is literally one where you look back, you go above the level, the labyrinth, and are greeted with something vast and unsolvable. I like to think that it might allow Reedon, allow us to create what Burkert calls a sense of balance. In the epilogue to the beginner's guide, Reedon confesses that the thought of not being driven by external validation is unthinkable. One of the reasons the backlog is compelling is because it's a monument to validation, to something you were able to make yourself do. All those cells turning green in a spreadsheet become a testament to something. Maybe someone will see your backlog or your video on it and pat you on the back. In the real world, for a living, I'm a writer. I had to teach myself to work without the lab-perfect, muse-touched conditions I thought I needed when I was a teenager. I had to teach myself to write when there are no words, or when I can't make myself get out of bed in the morning. And I'll be the first to admit that one of the things that makes it doable is external validation. My internal validation is out of whack. If I feel like I've been a bad friend or bad partner on any particular day, I can hope someone will message me when the next piece goes live, telling me that it's good, that what I did was worthwhile. I'd be lying if I said that this video, long, rambling, and unsure of itself that it is, exists without the hope, maybe even the need for external validation. But if I don't get it, I think that's okay. When you first make YouTube videos, even when you just think about it and see the cottage industry of how-to YouTube channels, the endless Reddit communities, the Discord servers, there's one thing that I think you need to try and make peace with. The idea that even if something is good, even if it's perfect, even if it's at the exact confluence of right topic, right time, it might not get seen. The thing that surprised me the most about making videos is that I've somehow made peace with this. That in one hand, I'm able to hold the idea that the work on its own is enough. That this is something I felt compelled to say, and that there's merit in saying it, even if no one hears. If you're still here, I'm glad and I'm grateful. Thank you for watching this. It isn't something that I ever thought I'd write. When I was thinking about this channel, when I made my first few videos, I had a strong sense of what I thought its identity would be, but this flies in the face of that, but in a good way, I hope. It took a long time to put together, and it took a lot out of me. If you're able to, you can support more things like this at patreon.com/Oblivion Broadcasting. There's a single tier, and it costs £1. Till next time, go well.